Someone asked me the other day, we were talking about qualifications to run for this office, and asked me, so, well, Chris, are you a Harvard-educated attorney? And I said, no. They said, well, are you a medical doctor? And I said, no. Just a businessman. They said, well, are you a Yale-educated economist? And I said, no. And they said, well, are you an accountant? I said, no, I'm a businessman. And they said, well, you know, or I thought that was enough qualification, but they said, well, what other qualifications do you have? And I thought a little while, and I said, you know, I've got 2 qualifications that are in real short supply in Washington these days. They said, what's that? I said, well, I have a valid birth certificate from Bell County, Texas, and I know how to balance a checkbook. So, you know, I think that we've really gone off track in this nation. You know, we worked real hard in 2010 to take over the House of Representatives, and we did that, and I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm awful disappointed in what we've done up there. I mean, we raised the debt ceiling $2 trillion, went $2 trillion further in debt. We got a goofy 12-member super committee that is pretty constitutionally questionable. I didn't vote for anyone on that committee, and so I wasn't represented on it. You know, our congressmen shouldn't abdicate their responsibility over to a committee like that, you know. It was pretty much set up to fail. You know, we knew the outcome of it. It was going to happen. We, you know, in addition to that, we said we did it for a vote on a balanced budget amendment. Well, that's well and good, but we took over the House in 2010. We, starting in 2011, we could have had a vote on the balanced budget amendment in the House anytime we wanted to. We set the agenda there. So why did we have to spend $2 trillion, get the 12-member super committee to get permissions from the Democrats to have a vote that we could have had whenever we wanted to? You know, the problem with it also was, y'all know who Congressman Paul Ryan is, Republican budget writer. Hey, he writes a budget. I mean, he seems to be one of the only people in Washington capable of actually putting together a budget. I don't agree with everything in it, but you know, kudos to him. But this balanced budget amendment they presented was so weakly framed that Paul Ryan voted against it. He said this will lead to higher taxes and bigger government. There was no spending caps in it of any kind. I mean, so even that, I think we knew that fell all along. And so I don't think anyone's serious about cutting spending. Maybe we're arguing over who gets to spend the money instead of actually cutting it. You know, you take his budget proposal, and like I say, I take my hat off to him. He introduced a budget. But basically, they'll tell you that budget cuts $4 trillion over 10 years. Well, it still adds $5 trillion to the debt over 10 years. It just doesn't add $9 trillion to the debt. And in Washingtonese, that's cutting spending, okay? You know, that's not my definition of cutting spending. Say Cliff and I have a chicken place here, and y'all are the board of directors, the taxpayers, board of directors, and Cliff and I talk, and times are hard, and, you know, we spent $100 last year. And y'all tell us y'all gotta watch it. So, okay, so we get together, and Cliff says, Chris, man, we need to spend $110 this year. I said, I don't know, Cliff, time's pretty tight. I said, tell you what, let's spend $105. Cliff says, well, okay, we can do that. Then we come to y'all, the board of directors, and stand up and say, Cliff and I have decided to cut spending by $5. Well, that's not the truth. We increased spending by $5. We just didn't increase it by 10. To me, a cut in spending is, Cliff and I spent $95. That's a $5 cut in spending. You know, the best analogy I can do, our current administration has us heading toward a financial cliff at 100 miles an hour, pedal to the metal. And we took over the House in 2010 and we sent a message, and the message we sent was not slow down to 95 miles an hour and go off the cliff, all right? And I've tried to get through to that, and people will tell you, people from Washington will tell you, you know, I'll tell them, guys, instead of slowing down, I think we need to turn. I think we need to turn and not go over the cliff. They'll say, Chris, man, that sounds real good, but dang it, we might hit a tree. I'm like, you know, we might. I agree, guys. Nobody's going to like this. We might hit a tree. You know, but we might find a nice highway like this country used to be on. Like they like to say, the path to prosperity. We might find that again if we don't go over this cliff. And I think we can all agree on that. To me, it's simple and maybe oversimplified, but kind of if you know where I come from, I think you'll know how I'd vote on most things. But we're trying to adopt a system that's failed the world over many times. We've seen this. I mean, we've seen this. We've seen this printing of money and devaluing the money. We've seen the endless entitlement and social programs. And, you know, the latest thing was the issue we've seen on government mandating contraceptives. I mean, let's face it, guys, the real question here, the real question boils down to this. If the federal government is responsible to provide someone for their social life with contraceptives, what are we not responsible for? If we go to that level, your food, what are we not responsible for? I mean, if we're going to go that far, how far? My problem is, I always like to look at things. You know, I had a guy tell me one time, he said, formal education is formal education, and we agree. And he said, but he said something really profound. He said, you know, inherent intelligence is how to solve a problem. Here's a problem, here's a solution. He said, but you know, common sense is, here's a problem, here's the solution you propose. But what about when this happens because of that solution? And you know, I think that's what we need to look out for. And I'll just use that as an easy example. How far a jump is it from a government providing you with contraception to telling you how many children you can or can't have? It's not that great a leap, guys. It's not that great a leap. So I think what we need to do in this country to get back on path, we need to go back to the things that made us the greatest, most prosperous, freest nation on earth. And if we will go back to those principles and values, I think our turnaround will be remarkably swift. You know, among these are inclusion of God, okay? Constitutionally limited federal government, true fiscal responsibility, individual liberty, economic freedom, and personal accountability. We have to quit promoting government dependency and start promoting personal accountability. You know, there's a lot of things, you know, we need to go back to our Constitution in spirit as well as in letter. I don't know about in Brownwood. San Angelo, Texas, we don't have prayers at Friday night football games anymore because we might offend someone. Now, is the First Amendment really there to keep us from praying at a Friday night football game? Or was it there to ensure our right to do so? You know? While we're on that, you know, all this comes up about using different laws in our courts, like the Sharia law and stuff. Look, I have a simple answer to that. In America, we're governed, now let me rephrase that. We are supposed to be governed by laws passed in accordance with our Constitution. All right? That's how we're supposed to be governed. So we're not going to have a different set of laws for Christians, a different set of laws for Buddhists, a different set of laws for Hindus, a different set of laws for atheists, a different set of laws for Wiccans, or a different set of laws for Muslims. Look, if you don't like the laws passed in accordance with our Constitution in this country, you're free to go somewhere where you do like the laws. All right? You know, my Constitution's always began, we the people of the United States. It doesn't begin, we the people of the United Nations. It doesn't begin, we the people of the global community. American citizens should not be subjected to agreements made by the UN, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund shouldn't spend American taxpayers' money, the World Bank, you know, no UN small arms treaties, okay? No Agenda 21. Look, whether it's our guns, whether it's our dollars, or whether it's our children's future, America's answer to the globalists should be no, we'll take care of things here. You know, like I say, we need true fiscal responsibility again. The debt ceiling deal, we've covered that. You know, you can't, I'm not an economist or an accountant or a medical doctor, but I do know this. You can't get out of debt by continuing to borrow and spend money you don't have. And that's what we're trying to do. We'll hit on the bailouts for a while. And there's a lot of arguments for them, but the simple thing is this. The free market, once again, made us the most prosperous, highest standard of living nation on earth. And in 2008, we abandoned it. We abandoned it. All right? So, at this point, maybe if we would, it allowed the government to creep in and intrude into all our private sectors. I mean, first it was the banks, then it was the automakers, then it's, I mean, we opened up Pandora's box and told the government it's okay. You know? Now, would we have had economic, you know, would we have had an economic Armageddon if we wouldn't have passed it? Gosh, guys, we're going to have an economic Armageddon over everything that comes up in Washington. If we don't do the TARP, if we don't pass the debt ceiling deal, if we don't spend this money, if we don't subsidize this or that, it's going to be an economic tsunami. We're going to be wiped out. Well, you know, the thing is, you look at the FDIC failed bank list, and more banks failed after the TARP. Small and medium-sized banks failed after the TARP because of regulations and FDIC premiums and things imposed on them to bail out the other banks, the big ones. So, you know, I mean, but the bottom line is we abandoned the free market on that. You know, there's just a lot of things like that that we have to go back to. The EPA, you know, we have to reduce the size and scope of this government. Look, we have a government we can't afford. We run over $1 trillion a year deficit. We have a government we can't afford. We can talk about all this, but that is the bottom line. We can't afford it. But you know, we're going to have to reduce that. It's some perfect examples. Federal Department of Education. Our test scores around the world on our children just keep going down. They just keep going down. Before we had a Federal Department of Education, we had some of the highest test scores in the world. Right? It's a failed thing. We need to put that back in the hands of the states. The people in Brownwood, Texas know what the kids in Brownwood, Texas need. The people in San Angelo, Texas know what the kids in San Angelo need. Odessa, Comanche, name it. And the best decisions can be made at the state and local level. It's silly for us to send dollars to Washington, for them to take 80 cents of that dollar to provide themselves with jobs and mandate back to Brownwood, Texas, what you have to do to get your 20 cents back. Leave the dollar here to begin with. Department of Energy. They employ like 70,000 people. How much energy do they produce? Has anyone seen any energy the Department of Energy produce? I've seen them lend money to Solyndra and failed solar firms. I've seen them do all that, but how much energy do they produce? Maybe we'd have more energy without a Federal Department of Energy. All right? The EPA. Totally out of control. How can our economy grow with all just its regulation after regulation? We're fighting the lizard situation in the Permian Basin, the Endangered Species Act, folks. Look, yeah, once again, I'm not a scientist, but I kind of have this theory, and I'd really like, I think their science is flawed, and I would like to have this argument on Capitol Hill with some of the scientists. Guys, is the only place you can find this lizard in the oil field in West Texas? Yeah. Are you sure that's the only place you can find that lizard? I mean, are you absolutely sure? Yes, Chris, we're absolutely sure. Well, that oil field's been there 100 years. So if the only place you can find that lizard is in the oil field, that lizard likes something in the oil field. And if we quit drilling and we shut down the oil field, the lizard's going to disappear. You're going to destroy its habitat because that's the only place you can find it. I mean, I know that's silly, but it makes as much sense as what they're trying to tell us about this. You know, we have wind farms. It's not about the endangered species. We have wind farms in California that kill 80 golden eagles a year. That's on endangered species, yet nothing is said because that's green energy. That's what they want. You know, let a mallard duck land out here in an oil tank in Crane, Texas and see what happens. It's not about the endangered species. It's about government control of a resource, of an economic resource. You know, the thing is, we may win the lizard battle. Well, the prairie chicken's sitting out there next. So we have to rein that. You know, we have to rein in these agencies. Like I say, we need to cut the budget. If you want less of something, cut the budget. And on some of these things, like Department of Education and Department of Energy, we need to do away with the whole department. We need to go back and put it back in the hands of the states. You know, I can go on and on, guys, but what the main problem I see in our country is we don't have bold, outspoken leadership anymore. Now, look, Ronald Reagan was a hero of mine, and I'm sure he was a lot of y'all's. I didn't agree with all his policy decisions. Some of them I flat didn't like. But the thing was, he was proud to be an American, and he made us proud to be Americans. But what we need is, you know, if you remember the Brandenburg Gate, okay? Now, all his advisors, his speechwriters, and everyone told him, my gosh, don't say that. Like, get that out of there. Well, he kept taking out his speech and everything. And remember, this was the Soviet Union. This wasn't Russia of today. I mean, it was the Soviet Union. When I was a kid, we used to have the drills of get under our desk and cover up our heads because the Russians were going to nuke us. I mean, you know, we were scared of them. But Ronald Reagan stood up at the Brandenburg Gate. This is what our leaders would do today. Okay? This is what, boy, this is hard for me. I'm not politically correct, so I'll just say it. This is what most of our Republican leaders would even do today, much less who we have president now. But Ronald Reagan did not stand up there and say, Mr. Gorbachev, let's do a study. Let's form a committee. Let's do a poll and see how this will affect our re-election. Let's open up a little bit of wall and see how people like it, and if they like us, they'll really. That's not what happened. Ronald Reagan stood there and he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. That's leadership. Well, you know, I'm all for advisors, but we don't have a shortage of advisors in this country. We don't have a shortage of plans. We don't have a shortage of committees. Evidently, we have a shortage of leadership. I mean, that's the way it looks to me. Maybe that's simple. If it is, fine. To me, this primary is one of the easiest votes that Republicans ever have to make because all they have to do is decide what they stand for. So, if you're a Republican that believes in bailouts, redistribution of taxpayer wealth through bailouts, if you believe in 12-member super committees, if you believe in earmarks, if you believe in raising the debt ceiling and continuing borrowing money, if you believe in career politicians, and if you believe that the answer to our problems in this country is go along to get along and compromise, don't vote for Chris Younts because he's not that kind of Republican. Vote for the incumbent because that's part of his record I just told you. If you don't believe in those things, then it's an easy vote. But we have to decide who we are as Republicans. Okay? You know, what I want to do, what I will do, I will take that kind of leadership. West Texas should be leading the fight. Central Texas, our area of Texas, should be leading in Washington. Look, we have the best economy. We are in better shape than anyone in this nation. We should be leading. We can't continue to play the status quo game. And that's what we're doing. So if that's the kind of, if you want a congressman that wants to take, that, if you want a congressman that doesn't want to bring D.C. home to Texas, but wants to take Texas conservative principles and values to Washington and stand on them, then every campaign needs volunteers, and I know Cliff needs some in Brown County.